G'day viewers. So reconstructing Viking sword and shield techniques according to historical sources and principles is a legitimate thing. But of course to do it you need the right tools. So as the title suggests, this is a review of the Black Armoury HEMA Viking sword. Now Black Armoury are from France, so possibly they are Armoury Noir in their native country. I had no idea they even existed until one of my students turned up with one of these swords. And I was so impressed I went out and bought two more and a bunch of other stuff. So let's see what they're like. So what are the qualities you want in a Dark Age sword? Well, the two primary things are you want a very tight grip, okay? You want this pommel and crossguard to be nice and tight and restricted so it really locks that hand into a hammer grip and you can't extend your arm like some sort of modern sabery thing, okay? Locks it into these tight arcing cuts. That's the way that the swords were originally designed. The other thing you want is for the sword to be light. Now on both these counts, most Viking swords that you can buy off the shelf fail rather miserably. People don't like this restrictive grip, they don't like that pommel digging into their wrist, and so they make the handles incredibly long so that they can use it like a saber, and of course that is silly. Also, most Viking swords that you get off the internet are really made for Dark Age reenactment combat, and so they tend to be built for robustness and lots of heavy shield bashing rather than historical accuracy. Real Viking swords should be around about a kilo in weight. I was once privileged enough to handle very carefully a real one, and they are extremely light and well balanced. And so most reproductions are just way too heavy. So how does the Black Armoury one compare? So first of all, the weight is fantastic. It weighs just about a kilo, exactly like it should. The blade has got perfectly nice thick edges, perfectly reasonable fuller down there, and quite a bit of a taper, which gives it a slightly narrower shape than the real thing, but it does preserve that weight and balance fantastically. The other nice thing about it is the spatulated tip that they've put on there. Now, in this particular case, that's actually important. When you are using these swords, of course, there's a lot of action going on very close to the edge of your shield. And rubber tips quite often get caught on the edge of the shield and are ripped off the sword while using it. And so another solution needs to be found for thrusting. So having a spatula tip is actually a really good feature in this particular case. What about the grip? Well, if you look at it straight away, you'd say, well, that's a little bit long, isn't it? Couldn't you do a little bit of that? And, well, yes, I can. But, of course, it's designed to have some sort of HEMA-like hand protection inside it. So as soon as I put on any sort of gauntlet or padded glove, suddenly my hand is jammed in there exactly like it should, and I can no longer do wristy, sabery things. I have to use the sword in the way that it is intended to be used. Now, personally, I know why they've done this, because most people have red dragony type gloves as their primary thing, and it seems to be built specifically for this kind of glove. And that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. Personally, I think there are possibly less bulky answers to hand protection for doing Viking stuff, but as a standard kind of thing, it's actually pretty good. If there were any negatives about it, it would be that it is relatively short. It's 27, 28 inches blade length, which is perfectly within historical range, I will admit. But it's the only size it comes in straight off the shelf. And it would have been nice maybe to have the option to have something a little bit longer for taller people. But that's a very, very minor gripe. And probably by just offering the one size, it's how they managed to keep the price down to such a reasonable level. So it is a really, really nice sword. I've been using this for about a month now, and the edges have not got a scratch on them. Not that there's an awful lot of edge-to-edge contact with Viking combat as well, but even so. And keeping that weight down is really important, because there are techniques that at least I believe you can do with a Viking sword, this kind of thing, which if the weight gets significantly above a kilo, suddenly become really quite awkward and unmanageable. So it's a really, really nice sword. Now, the other item that they offer that we bought some of are synthetic axe heads. Now, axe combat is really important for reconstructing Viking stuff, because they had far more axes than they had swords. And again, my personal take on it is, if a technique doesn't work with or against somebody with an axe, then it's probably not right, because most of the time most people would have had axe and shield rather than sword and shield. And so they have these synthetic axe heads. Now, I was a little dubious about these, because most of the other synthetic headed things that I've got, like this poleaxe head or this silicon mace head, still hit really, really hard. Okay, so really these sorts of things only have an advantage in preserving your plate armor from damage rather than any particular safety value. And so I was a little concerned that synthetic axe heads would be about the same. Fortunately, I was completely wrong. These are absolutely beautiful. They're light, and that's important, because axes hit really, really hard. Okay, it's really difficult to spar with steel axe heads in any sort of safe manner, because they're just dangerous things. They're stiff enough that they can do hooks, so you can hook away other people's shields and weapons with them, and they're stiff enough to cope with that. But they also got just enough flex, you can see that little bit of flex there, so that if you hit somebody too hard, it starts to bend and takes a lot of the sting out of that. And so we've been using these in conjunction with the steel swords, and obviously sort of, most contact, if there is contact, happens on the shaft, but even the synthetic axe head itself seems to put up with the occasional contact with the steel sword just fine. So these are really, really good solutions. They also do a broad axe head, which I'm going to get in my next order, and these come in a couple of different models, but they're really good. They've got just enough of that flex there to take the sting out of a thump. So for equipping yourself for reconstructing Viking combat, both these tools are absolutely 5-star. Okay, the Viking sword comes in 2 different pommel designs, doesn't seem to be any other difference between them, and is just by far the best reconstruction of a Viking sword I've seen, other than really high-end custom jobs. And the X-heads are a really, really excellent solution if you want to explore Viking axe and shield, and I guess if you want to do tomahawk and that kind of thing, these are much better than any of the other solutions that I have seen for this. The other thing to add is that Black Armoury's customer service is also 5-star. When I ordered this, their shopping cart wasn't really working. It wouldn't let me pay for anything in any form whatsoever. I emailed them, and within 24 hours they'd stuck the order together and sent me a PayPal invoice for the whole thing. So really, really good customer service, and everything arrived perfectly safe and sound. So Black Armoury, Viking sword, and axe head.